Let's put let's mute.
Kakarosh Boker Or. I wanted to share with you a beautiful idea, which has to do with the Haftarah. The Haftarah of this Shabbat, and that's where we actually get the name from, is Shabbat Shuva or Shabbat Teshuvah. But the Haftarah is Shuva Yisrael Ad Hashem Elokecha. You have to return until HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara Masechet Baba Batra says that there were three people where the Yetzer Hara was not able to control them: Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And some people add a fourth one, David HaMelech. Right? Also, that there was no pull of the Yetzer Hara. And there's a whole thing about why, where's it written. Fine. There's a rabbi called the Reisha Rav that he comes and he says like this: do you know, usually there are four excuses that people give for not living up to what's expected from them, and they sin. What are the four excuses? If you're going to think about four different excuses, right, what would you give? So the first justification is one's parents. Why? They say, what do you want from me? My parents were no good. Their habits became my second nature. So what do you want from me? And this, by the way, in nowadays society, we call tinok shenishba. There does exist such a concept where if a person's parents brought them up in a certain environment, so you can't really accuse them of doing something because they're oblivious. They have no idea what's going on. So the one excuse that usually people always give is, I was born this way in my parents. These are my parents. This is what I was born. So how do you want me to keep Shabbat if my parents were not Shomer Shabbat? How do you want me to go to the Bet Knesset if my parents didn't go to Bet Knesset? How do you? That's one excuse. You blame the parents, right? Second excuse: excessive wealth. What does that mean? The Torah says in Ha'azinu, "Vayishman Yeshurun vayivat." We became fattened. What does that mean? When you grow up financially privileged, it spoils a person, and it spoils them spiritually. Many times people think that money is the biggest bracha. Sometimes money could be the biggest klala. You don't know how many times it happened. It happened to me in the Bet Knesset that I came and I spoke, and it happened to me that I only found out afterwards that mamash, this guy was poor. He had nothing to his name. The most simplest wedding, the most everything that you want. All of a sudden, the big money started coming in, got divorced. The children are, it's a mess, complete mess. But why? Because they thought that a lot of money, wealth is the biggest beracha. Sometimes it could be the biggest challenge and the big person's biggest downfall, right? Remember how many people fell because of their money, whether it's Korach, whether it's because of, Haman, whether it's a Rovo Shro, there's a lot of people that they fell because of that. The third one is, right, friends, associates, their environment. I thought that for sure everyone was going to get. The environment, meaning you're going to ask you, why are you doing Avirot? Well, it's my environment. That's where I am. Those are my neighbors. Those are the people around me, my classmates, my this, my that. Why? Because a person obviously is, if they're doing it, I'm not any worse than them. Or I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, in a sense, or the wrong crowd. Fine. And the last one is the one that you guys mentioned, which is basically, it's the evil tendencies is because of the mazal of a person. Just like the Gemara says in Masechet Shabbat, the astrological signs, right, which are like the mazalot, right, the constellations. It plays a role in who the human being is. So, for example, if a person is born in Ma'adim, so therefore, what's going to happen? He's got a tendency that he loves blood. He loves all the. So the Gemara mentions there. It doesn't mean anything. You could still channel it, the energy for the good. You could become a shochet. You become a mohel. You could do this. Or you could be even a doctor. But then you could be a bandit, or you could be a thief or a murderer. I'm saying it all depends on what a person wants. But the mazal of how a person is born also plays a very important role in what it is. Now, again, one more time, 4 different reasons. Now, again, these are the main reasons. You could have branches, because under the one of mazal, or under the one, let's say, of the wealth, or all these things, you could have. So, for example, somebody mentioned about death. So you're right. If somebody has excessive wealth, that could go. If somebody comes and they think that they're going, so they want to enjoy themselves for the last few minutes, that could go maybe under that category. And each one could go subcategories. But the main categories that people blame is their household, meaning how do they grow up, right? Whether it's going to be excessive wealth, meaning they're, society with with their money and everything else, their friends and associates, And number 4, their temperament, their mazal in itself. Says the rabbis, those 4, each one was a different of the ones that we mentioned. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and David. So let's start. Avraham. Which one's Avraham? If you would give one to Avraham Avinu, what would you give to Avraham Avinu? His parents. Where did Avraham grow up? Avraham grew up in the house of Terach. Terach was one of the main idolaters. He sold. He was renowned for selling idols. And Avraham came and he smashed all of them and he destroyed everything. And then even though he acquired it from his parents, he destroyed it. He despised that which his father honored. And therefore he broke and he overcame his Yetzer Hara. So the first excuse was Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was the first excuse of what? Of the parents. Not because your parents did something you have to follow suit like a little chicken or a little thing following. No, you have to break through. Next one, Yitzchak Avinu. What was Yitzchak Avinu? Wealth. Yitzchak Avinu was very, very wealthy. And when he was very, very wealthy, it says that he planted the Me'asharim and he had tons of wealth. They sent him away even because he had so much wealth, right? He was very, very wealthy. And still it didn't turn him astray, the opposite. He was always serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The third one, Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu was what? The influence. He went and he told Lavan, right? He went and he told Esav, even though I was in the house of Lavan, Taryag mitzvot shamarti, I still, right? In Lavan garti, Taryag mitzvot shamarti. It doesn't matter who I lived, where I lived with. I could be living with an Esav, and I'm still a big tzaddik. And I could be living with Lavan, and I'm still going to be a big tzaddik. Nothing's going to change because it doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, you have to pay attention to where you're going. You have to make sure about that. The last one was David HaMelech. David HaMelech was born what? An Admoni. You remember Admoni? We said that we gave this in previous shiurim that we said that David HaMelech, when he was born, he looked like Esav. He was like a redhead. He looked like Esav. Ad kedei kach, when Shemuel HaNavi came to anoint him, he went and he said, I don't understand. I'm going to anoint an Esav as a king? And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, yes, but he's Admonim Yefeh Einayim, with beautiful eyes. He goes with the eyes of the Sanhedrin. He's going to come, which means not because he had a certain temperament, not because he had a certain mazal of how he was born, it's going to dictate who he is. He's got the power to overcome his Yetzer Hara to become the best of the best, because when he comes and he changes that. Therefore, these 4 spiritual giants, they come and they teach us that it's neither nature or nothing, right? Nothing, no nurture, nothing is going to come and govern. At the end of the day, you are in control, whether it's of your moral and spiritual destiny, you are able to do that. And that's the pshat when it says, Shuva Yisrael ad Hashem Elokecha, return until Hashem Elokecha, applies to every single human being. There's not one human being, because no matter what type of an excuse that you want to give, it's not going to help. Now that we just mentioned this, we're going to mention an incredible Gemara. Listen to this. Gemara Mesechet Avodah Zarah. This is one of the main Gemarot that they speak about to do with the concept that Teshuvah is dependent upon me. It's not dependent upon anybody else, and it's only dependent upon me. En hadavar talui bi. And we always mention the concept of imena nili mili. If it's not for me, it's nobody else. Because if not, people come and they start depending it. So why don't you do teshuvah? Well, it's my rabbi. Well, maybe he doesn't put enough pressure. He doesn't call me enough. And the other one is going to tell you, yes, so it's my wife. Because listen, she's not on the same spiritual level. And then some people are going to say, listen, it's the children. I have to take care of them lots. I can't really learn. And I can't really do that. And I can't do that. And other people are going to come. They're going to say it's their colleagues, but they're their friends. But then they're going to start laughing at them if they come and they start doing a mitzvot. And people will always make it depend upon somebody else. And they don't realize that it always depends upon them. Remember, when you point with one finger to someone, you always have a minimum of 4 fingers pointing back to you, right? So therefore, what ultimately is going is, it's all up to us, and we're the ones that are in charge of it. But listen to this story. The story is talking about Elazar ben Durdia. And Elazar ben Durdia, he was so far gone that he even heard it, right, from basically from a zona, from a harlot, right? That she went and told him, listen, just like a passing of a gas, it goes out and it can never come back in. So too, you're so far away, you can never come back. You're basically too far, because he went and he did every other vida possible, every sin possible. When he heard it, it hit him. right? It hit him strong. It's when you hear from the lost law that they're going to tell you such a thing, and the second that somebody gives you a challenge that you cannot do it, right? Because so all of a sudden he comes and he wakes himself up and he says, "What's going on over here? What am I doing in my life?" So what does he do? He runs and he starts begging from the mountains and the hills, then the heavens and the earth, and the sun and the moon, and then the stars and constellations. And he asks each one of them to pray for him. And each one, they respond by saying that, listen, first they have to pray for themselves, and then they could pray for them. So once he realized, right, that it was basically only up to him, so what happened? He placed his head into his knees. He started crying loudly until basically he passed away. And there was a bat call, a heavenly voice that comes out and says that Rabbi Elazar ben Durdia is Mezuman l'chai olam haba. He's going to be, right, destined to the world to come. So now the question is, what happened exactly? What's he trying to get from whether it's the mountains, the hills, the heaven and the earth, the sun and the moon, the stars and cosmos? What's going on? What type of story is this? Right? So basically, when we gave the introduction, now we actually understand something beautiful. He says, Rabbi Elazar ben Durdia, he tried to play the blame game. He wanted to blame everything in order to justify all of his sins. And therefore, that's the way that he lived. So he looked to excuse himself. So what was the first excuse? Right? The mountains and the hills. Who are the mountains? Shila ma'alot, esa enai el he'arim. Right? Who to the mountains? What are the mountains? He says, the Gemara in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph says, the mountains is an allegory for our parents. Our parents are our mountains. And therefore he went and he said, the reason why I had these evil traits was because of my parents. So therefore, he comes and he turns to the mountains and the hills. And he says, listen, you've got the mountains, the hills, the patriarchs, the matriarchs, right? Our forefathers, the mothers. And he starts blaming them. And again, they come and they say it has nothing to do with it. Why? Because at the end of the day, you have to do it yourself, right? You have to come and you're going to have to, not because of that. Look at the opposite. You can't blame your parents. So then who did he turn to? The heaven and the earth. The heaven and the earth is the geographical location of where you are in life. And he blamed them. He says, if I was born somewhere else, right? Maybe different friends, different influences, I would have been something different. But the heaven and earth said as well, you can't ask mercy for him to take, see why? Because no matter the influences and the circumstances in life, you have the power to rise above it. So don't look towards the heaven and the earth where you are in heaven and earth. So fine. So then he went to the sun and the moon. What was the sun and the moon? The sun and the moon are the ones which impact the growth and prosperity. The sun is always what gives off for the sun, in order for the sunlight, in order for the things to grow, right? And the moon. So he comes and he says, right, as if to say that it all depends on the livelihood. So he said, you guys are responsible because obviously I had so much money and everything. Save me, speak up for me. What did they answer? It's not our fault. You did it for yourself. Why? Because again, you could have handled your wealth differently and you could have acted differently. And therefore you're able to do that. So finally he went and he begged the stars and the constellations, the mazalot. What are the stars and the constellations, the mazalot? Those are blaming his mazal. He said he was probably born a bal ta'ava, somebody that had a huge desire for many different lusts and desires. So for what are you blaming me for? This is the way that I was born. And again, they said it's not true. Because at the end of the day, right, he was not born like that. He heard the vision saying, it's your fault. It's not in ourselves. It depends upon you. Because you could take the exact same mazal and just change it for the good. You're the one which is in control. So now, all of a sudden, now he realizes that he's the only one to blame. And now these excuses are not going to help him anymore. So now all of a sudden, it doesn't matter whether it's excuses of faulting his parents or faulting the excessive wealth, the financial circumstances, or his friends, or the stars, the mazal that he was born in, and his temperament and the way that he is. All of a sudden now he's ready to do teshuvah. So what happens? He comes and he starts doing teshuvah until he actually dies through doing teshuvah. And then he's rewarded in a place in Olam Haba. The second a person realizes that there's no such excuses in the world and no one else is to blame other than ourselves, that's what changes the person. And that person gets to the highest, raises to the highest heights that a person, and that's what the Bat Kol said. Rabbi Elazar ben Durdia is destined, Mezuman l'chai olam haba, right? He gave him the title of Rabbi. Why? Because once he realizes it depends only upon you, Now you're able to talk. Now we're talking. And that's why it says, Shuva Yisrael ad Hashem Elokecha. Now you could return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.